At a certain collective level, the more transient the idea, the more likely it is to be wrapped in an aura of transcendency. At local stockyards, donkeys will bring higher prices if offered as unicorns. In conversation, a father noted, "Man is the only 3D creature who can do himself intentional harm." And his son replied, "But isn't man also the only 3D creature who can do anything?" Quite so, my boy, quite so. The partisan mind is the only mind known and available to ordinary men. Upon awakening each day, before he got out of bed, to himself this one man would recite the following. A priest, a politician, a painter was swimming in a lake of boiling oil when a banker rode by on a Western Union bicycle and said, and then he used filling in the blank of what was said in lieu of morning coffee. First guy says, "Boy, am I sick of hearing people go on and on talking about human nature." The second guy says, "Well, what else are they going to talk about?" And the first guy replies, "Well, I don't know, but I'm still sick of it." Even when appearing well, the potentially ill love to discuss sickness. Man began trying to develop thinking machines as soon as they saw how successful they were with their invention of muscle labor machines. A mystic, nonetheless, is still trying to develop himself as his own thinking machine. We say to other people the kinds of things we want to say to ourselves, but are too ashamed to. An economic definition you won't find in your textbook. Being alive. Swapping a short-term gain for a long-term profit. And a blue ribbon panel of experts say they're not at all surprised at its exclusion. Have you ever noticed how rare it is to have some normal, serious person be able to accept a new, unexpected take on some normal, serious subject? Humph! Thank God I don't have to deal with such questions. I'm an expert. That was a quote from somebody. A two-line history of man, the civilized, thinking and talking creature. In the beginning, the strong, silent alpha wolves took charge of the pack. Then, as man progressed, leadership shifted to the verbal intellectuals. Please note that the second line is simply fine-sounding bullshit. One man would often sit alone with his dictionary and randomly select an entry, then ask himself, exactly what purpose is being served by man having this particular word? Simple minds disagree, which collectively is how the simple minds eventually become more complex. The few who would be true individuals can't wait that long. Portrait of truth via the Socratic dialogue brought up to date. The teacher. What would you like to ask me today, my boy? The student. Why are so many of men's songs and poems about sadness? The teacher. Because they're so easy to write. Student. That's it? Teacher. Yep. Student. That's not quite the complex type of response I'd expected. Teacher. So? Student. Well, it's just not, that's all. It seems too easy. Teacher. You mean easy like in obvious? Student with light bulb flashing over his head. Ah. Another helpful hint. Even the worst of stuff don't suck real bad if you don't stare at it. On a rainy day, you don't ever know which mutter is going to come in first. And that's what I call that horse, you dumb mutter. And the correct answer is It's according to what kind of foods you get to your brain. And the contestant asked, by food you mean like proteins and sugars, or like negative ideas and simplistic views? I'm sorry, contestant, but I ask the questions around here. A man with a hero has an open wound of which he is unaware. To be able to personally think in an extraordinary heroic manner is to have an intellect that can climb up on its own shoulders and look out far beyond the normal horizon, which, along with his fellow minds it helped create, and see astonishing new sights, without being much impressed by the fact that his new height is based upon him standing on himself. The difference between an educated, sophisticated cannibal and a mystic is that only one of them actually understands what it is that's on the menu. Travel reminder. Remember, if you're surrounded by agreeable, like-minded passengers who, same as you, go moo, you're not on an excursion tour, but a cattle train. Father, is that why so many knowledgeable birds of a feather wouldn't stick only together? Quite so, my boy, and also why the routine-minded would find the transcendental trip so disturbing and uncomfortable. Anomalous aviary addendum. The ordinary mind knows what it likes and likes what it likes. Why do you think it's known as the partisan mind? In the city, serious art may be art, but it ain't much of an art. As he would trim the limbs from the trees in his yard, one man would apologize to them for the cutting. And one day the wind overheard him and remarked, "What a fool." And the change of seasons countered, "Ah, but not true. It's just that man's the only being you've ever confronted who puts words to his feelings." And the wind thought about this for a while, but still couldn't grasp its significance. Routine man's resignation to thinking the thoughts of others is well represented by the dieter who, as he gobbled down the shoplifted candy, said to himself, "If you didn't pay for it, it don't count." And now for a hint that is far beyond any description of being merely helpful. If you begin to say that something is long overdue, it will seem to become long overdue. No need to thank me. That could drag it back down to the mundane level. But Papa, isn't that true of any situation wherein the uncomfortable party makes a feeble attempt to tip the firing squad for their efforts? Yes, my boy, but no one's supposed to mention it. A viewer writes, existing in an ordinary automatic condition of consciousness is not so bad, as long as you're not aware of it. And one man suddenly thought, wait a minute, life itself is already plenty enthusiastic. Why should I have to do anything but lay back, relax, and coast? Conversation overheard in a city college. Professor says, if you breed the simple with the intelligent, what do you get? Obviously something at least better than the simple, right? Well, don't you bet on it. And the student responds, oh, I thought you said that this was the math department. And the professor replied, oh, did you think I was talking about something, like psychology or something? And the student says, oh. Or perhaps the person that reported this story misunderstood what was said. Now for a follow-up to an earlier story. Plain partisan thought believes that mixing yellow and blue will always give you green, while those in the know that this should remain to be seen. Men got the idea for science fiction, and in particular, battles between different creatures from different realities, from casual observation of how diverse ideas struggle for survival within the universe of their own mind. Well, Daddy, where then did men get the inspiration for metaphysical poetry? Son, that came from certain science fiction writers falling down long flights of stairs and suffering substantial brain damage. The publishing firm of Life agreed to add this one man to its stable of authors, but only if he'd accept an editor of its choosing, which he did. That is, until he realized that the position was going to be filled by the twin brother team of outdated aggression and pseudo-sophisticated myopia. And just in case it happened to somehow slip past your busy attention, everybody starts off writing for Life. Oh, and yet another definition of a mystic. A mystic. About the only guy left without an agent. A conversation between two culinary masters touching on matters intellectual. Men like proverbs, maxims, and truisms for the same reason that they prefer hors d'oeuvres over a full meal. But they don't prefer hors d'oeuvres over a full meal. My point exactly. And I'm sorry to say that we cannot bring you more of this dialogue due to the overriding clamor raised by the sudden fist fight between the two. But on to some medical news. One man in the northern sector of the city periodically suffered brief mini-strokes, of which he eventually became so fond that he gave each one of them their own individual name, taken from those of the mythical muses of his ancestors. Upon hearing this, one kid wanted to ask his father if this is how religion got started, but decided against it at present after remembering that his Uncle Waldo, who was a partially re-embalmed rabbi now employed as a part-time neurologist, was visiting them. And there was yet another gent who would while away quiet evenings at home, snipping out select words from his dictionary as he softly hummed to himself, "No need for that one," and "No need for this one." Where did the term "it takes one to know one" originate? From humans looking at one another. One man asked everyone he met, "May I ask you a question?" See, it was a joke. Only the weak get offended. And their friends. How life's inexorable genetic growth through man is reflected in visible cultural changes, which in turn are exemplified by verbal alterations, as operational Western Hemisphere, late 20th century. End of title. Rock and roll, any music that adults don't like. Jazz, any music that rock and rollers don't like. The mystical, the music that everyone faintly hears but never pursue sufficiently to discover whether they would actually like it or not. Oh, plus, men have an unrecognized fear that should they find the truth, they won't be able to dance to it. Local conditions told its young apprentice, "Don't pay any attention to what men claim they want. If life had warned them to have as much fun intellectually as they do sexually, it arranged things that way. Don't let them suck you into things that you shouldn't be involved with." The future plays a dangerous game in that even it doesn't know minutely what it's going to do next. While in an urban pasture, a guy stopped and thought, "Forget worrying about what holds up civilization. Seriousness itself couldn't survive unless propped up by seriousness." Two kids were playing cowboys and doctors, and one of them said, "If hippos could talk, what do you think they'd say?" And that one replied, "Well, as soon as they realized what they'd gotten into, I bet you they'd go looking for man to take their revenge." Ask yourself this, if you laughed at that, why? The life of the intellect as a carnival, a ride on a miniature train, a poem. Everyone's mind's Mary and the Lamb, everyone's brain Punch and Judy. The spine's the midway, step right this way and listen for the merry-go-round's Rudy Tooty. And now some news from the battlefront. The hostilities continue to rage between the supporters of heredity and the proponents of environment. And while neither side appears posed to attain public supremacy, an increasingly rank odor arises from the area of the conflict. Let it also be noted that this story was not filed by any reporter with any credentials resembling the sane or official variety. No. To assist in combating his redundant, aggressive ineptitude, one man attempted from day to day to forget everything he already knew. Don't try this at home, don't try this at home. You can't do this at home, so don't try this at home. Daddy, is that why you must go to someone's office to get an official diagnosis of insanity? Yes, my boy, some things simply can't be done by a house call. There are two kinds of mystics, vocal ones and silent ones. And since you never hear the silent ones, you don't know what they know. A boy asked his older brother, "Why is it so often said that we should always respect another man's religion?" "I guess it's because everyone's is as totally opaque as our own, is as equally as opaque as our own." No. There are two kinds of mystics, the vocal ones and the silent ones. And since you never hear the silent ones, you don't know what they know. Well, older brother, might this actually be referring to the two levels of possible transcendental thinking within one's own mind rather than to external mystics? In the neural food chain, myths eventually become taken as literal history as simple minds age. From a more expansive, non-traditional view, anyone who worries over the routine affairs of life has a lot more than that to worry about. How the ordinary mind and its dealings with routine ideas works. Who cares that there are 90 billion fleas on the planet when it's a single one annoying you? Important city announcement. Regardless of what you've heard, the myth of progress is not false. More earth lore. Man is the talkative creature on this planet because no one else would take the job. After all, what is mystical thought other than that beyond the partisan? Daddy, may I have another definition, please? Well, certainly, my boy. Man, a futuristic relic of his ancestors. Ordinary men think about ordinary things. Crazy men think about things ordinary men say are crazy. No one knows, what a mystic thinks about. FYI, it's probably just as well. There is an item, it's a late breaker that did not get reported, didn't make it the cut. A kid asked his father, he says, "Is it more fun to talk about the weird things, the weird stuff, or everyday life?" And his father replied, "If you know how to look at it just right, there's nothing weirder than everyday life. It's the weirdest stuff of all." Tonight with several items having to do with the partisan mind again. It is so wired up, or it is wired up in such a way, as opposed to getting you caffeine fanatics overjoyed at your addiction. The partisan mind is wired in such a way, it is inclined in such a way, it is hungry in such a way that it will impose order. Physically, it will impose order as like a transparent overlay, but it will impose order in places that you would least expect it. For instance, even when it begins to think about ideas of the mystical. There is another level after what we've discussed before, just brought out all the way from as far back as recorded history goes. You have traces the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Sumerians, of mystery schools that was not all that hidden. I mean, it made the cut in ordinary history, made high school textbooks. They just said they're mystery schools. And, nobody stormed the temples down there and wanted to bring down the gods. You could go and try to get in, I guess. But there were mystery schools on the basis that even though they announced, or it was common knowledge, that there's something going on inside the temples back in the back room, or every Thursday, when the Masons are off getting drunk or running their little motorcycles and parades, the Shriners, that there's some of the Greeks that go back there, and there's something, and it's a secret, it's a mystery school on the basis that whatever it is they do and they talk about is not common knowledge. But you understand the fact that it existed wasn't a mystery. So we've got it all the way from that to what the ordinary mind now still wants to believe. That there is that many ordinary minds, even those who have some claim to being properly attracted to it, start off believing that there is a mystery to it that is undeserved. What an absolutely horrendous sentence. Thank you. Even those who might properly be attracted hereto, at the outset, believe that there is a mystery to it, a secretiveness and a mystery to it of such a degree, of such a sort, that is ultimately undeserved. Whew. So not only do you have plenty of people who have written and talked about and theorized some sort of extraordinary, secret, mystical alchemy of an intellectual nature, of a non-physical nature, some mystical activity. Not only that, but to show the degree to which the mind is driven by an urgent sense of order. And it is not through some flaw. It has to do with partisan mind. It just has to do with the balance of things, that it must impose order or the mind could not work. It will take that which at first blush could easily be described, if we're assuming that some sort of mystical work exists, or whatever they describe it, what they believe it is. Let's accept that. On top of that, they will, at sort of an advanced public degree, there's a smaller subsection of this kind of mystical history, the literature of mystical history and etc., that even dreams of and theorizes even a more secret inner core that is more stable, that actually directs the seemingly more chaotic, or strike more, tell that guy with the dictionary and the scissors, the seemingly chaotic external side. To wit, it's not as common, but surely some of you know, and you're about to, I'll tell you that there are books popping up all throughout history, reports, accounts of men who supposedly wormed their way into, bribed their way into, snuck into, as it were. If you'd like to see some more mythology taking as literal history now, in fact, they took his literal history and turned it into a physical practice. Someone slipping into Mecca. It's changed a little bit. If you people don't know, up until your lifetime, it was death without much of a trial. I mean, if they had another 30 or 40 seconds to kill, they'd say, that was your trial, that it was death on the spot for an infidel to slip into Mecca, to get into Mecca. There is that same sort of idea. Don't get lost this soon. I shouldn't have done that, but that was a whole other story. It's just, they're just everywhere you walk. I mean, you just walk around and there it is. What everybody else takes as literal history. And you think, my God, they have stepped and just walked doo-doo, cow stuff, over all this good stuff, and they just tromp right through it and call it history, which is all right. But sometimes I can't resist trying to stop and get you people to, sort of wipe a little off your foot and at least consider, wait a minute, that may not be where everybody stepped and said it was. No. There are continuing reports that pop up of men who some way, their story is, that they slipped into some real secret gathering. We're getting into deep doo-doo, or Deep Space Nine conspiratorial ideas of not just ideas of some secret organization or mystical schools or Sufi orders or whatever spotted throughout the world and hidden, disguised, and etc. Not only that, but that inside of that, as strange as that is by the regular reports over in the first section of your Dewey Decimal System in the library. Another side step I can't resist. Have you ever wondered why it is in the library that all the weird books, I'm talking about the routine weird books, are right there starting at 00? I mean, it doesn't start off with, mathematics or history or geography or even sociology or psychology. I mean, it's not even something that kind of strains your credibility or the definition of reality or serious science. It starts off with the absolute weirdest stuff, but you ever think, why? So it's right there by the door. Think about it. That if they set it up correctly, the way that the sequential mind would normally do, you go into the library, and it's the UFO books, and I talk to God and all that stuff. And right there, it's the first thing you get to. In many libraries, I've noticed, it's even before the kiddie section. They'll put the juvenile section somewhere else. Unless you would like to reconsider that first section of the Dewey Decimal System is a kind of a form of a mature juvenile section. But notice it's close to the door, they can get their hands on it, plus they can get out real quick. Plus, if the librarians are the decent people decide that they got to go, they don't have that far to throw them out the door. Just a thought, I don't know. It seemed to be that the matter of public space and individual space has come to some useful conclusion. These minds that believe not only in the existence of weird secret groups, they go further, and they believe that in many cases, that there is a even more secret, more deeply hidden core group that is the stable controller, director of the external form, which is always, by everybody's account, is always subject to great question as to its reliability, its predictability. It's always shaky. Even at the best apologists for their imagined great secret group, whoever's writing, even they can't help it. They always have to make some statement. They always have to make some caveat, some explanation in the beginning. If they say, well, I'm going to now write what I hope to be an up-to-date telling of such and such Hindu sect or such and such Buddhist group that teaches so-and-so. But let me tell you now, the school has been around, I am sure, I'm absolutely convinced, the people from Venus have told me this, that the school has been hiding out there in the mountains or behind the strip district there in Hong Kong now or Beijing for over 2,000 years. But now I'm going to describe it to you. I have the inside scoop on it. But I will tell you right out front, it is not as simple and straightforward as it would be if I were writing a history, say, of the Catholic Church. Everybody, even those who do not understand anything about it at all, even they have to say, even they are struck at the flimsiness of the structure, at the unpredictability of what seems to go on. A very dangerous and potentially undependable love affair is what they're stepping into, if you'd like to look at it that way. Since you enjoyed so much the side step to Mecca, how about romantic poetry? Why is it that men have always written about you can't trust a woman, and I fell in love and I gave her my heart? And it's just over and over and over. Me and Rex the Wonder Horse were both over and over as men whining like, and I did everything. I gave her, I went and slayed dragons, went in debt, did all sorts of things, and then what happened? Sooner or later, they'll all turn on you. Nobody seems to notice anymore. They just, I guess, chalk it up to the bad vapors going on back in the 1700s in Northern Europe. But think about it, men, using men in the widest possible sense, guys are supposed to have been heroic. And even if they weren't in their minds writing this kind of poetic fiction, they thought they were, and dreaming of, I went out and fought for the fair lady's hand, went through trials and tribulations. And it goes on for hundreds of pages, and all the great deeds he did. And what a guy he is. A man that don't take any crap off anybody. A man who will do anything for his true love. So he wins her. The king gives her over, whatever. They live happy for a little while, and then they hear of another dragon. He says, well, I got to run off. So here's the chastity belt, and he gives her one key. That's another story. Anyway, then he comes back and finds out that even his key won't fit it now, and he realizes some of the knights in the southern part of Germany used to say back in the 1600s, some of them, they were not only knights, but that was part-time. The rest of the time, they were drywall men, and they would say, uh-oh, I've been cuckooed. You linguistic scholars can figure out how it Certain other words came out of that, or vice versa. But why is it, what is that representing? A man who supposedly was giving himself. He's writing fiction so he can do anything he wants to, right? Right. Builds this great basis of an epic adventure about all he's done, how brave he is. They can torture him, dragons hold him down, and you breathe on him. People try to strip the skin off, and he keeps on. Nothing bothers him until he gets back home, and sure enough, within 2 or 3 months or years, what he fought for, this woman, ends up cheating on him or doing something. And then the rest of it's some kind of whine. Nobody ever thinks about that. I mean, it makes great soap opera, it makes great history. But you never thought, what in the hell's going on with this? I just told you.
Yeah.
The unreliability of love, the unpredictability. It's all unstable. I'm not saying that all those people that wrote all that whiny shit knew what they were doing, but as always, if you step in it and you wipe it off and you look, there was a basis for it. You just stepped on the slick stuff that transient, it comes and goes out there in the pasture, but the ground's always there. Take that, all you non-Mecca lovers. So we have these people believing that there is a secret core, some of them, within that which is already unreliable and unpredictable. The stories float out throughout history of some man finding his way into some great underground meeting, getting into Mecca, getting into a secret castle, into a secret group, and he finds out, sure enough, just as he suspected, not just the people, and he may not be attacking whatever was his original interest in an external group, you know, some Sufi order, some apparent Zen school, anything, some Christian order, that on the outside, those who really believe that they have a serious interest in things mystical and transcendental efforts, they only pursue that which interests them. So we're not talking about someone who's going in as a critic, we're talking about someone who is already at least an apologist in the literary sense of the word. So they're not attacking it, but even they always admit, whether they use these words or not, they all have to say, it's hard to stand on the outside and look at what they're doing and make absolute sense of it. Either that, or they'll say, well, it's hard to look at what they do and see that there is a direct, reliable, causal factor between whatever practices they're doing, meditating, fasting, going out sex, reading the Bible, reading the Quran 20 hours a day, whatever, that it's hard, they will admit. It's hard to see, it's hard to prove, it's hard to document that there is a direct, dependable causal relationship between that and the experience. In other words, the whole thing is shaky. They may not have a better program to offer. We're talking about just somebody who's writing about it and thinking that they're interested and been trying to pursue it and are now writing some sort of history or their experience with it. Then a few of these, I'm getting back around to it. What I want you to understand is even by the best ordinary accounts, by apologists, by supporters, by those interested in whatever form it seems to be taking, even they admit, or those running it, we've been through this, will admit, the head of some school, he will say, well, you can come join us now. We believe that you seem to be interested and we got an empty space. You can come join us. You know, you can't eat meat, you can't have sex, you can't talk, whatever they say, and you got to sit and meditate 12 hours a day. And plus remember this, now you're coming in, we're not dragging you in. You know, there's no guarantees. I've been doing this as the head guy, I've been doing this 40 years, and I'm just telling you, there's no guarantee, so don't start bitching. You know, if you don't like it, don't come complain, just leave. You don't have to bother to come tell us goodbye. You know, we've been through it, no offense, you know, no hard feelings, just leave. But don't come and try to say, well, it didn't work, because I'm telling you now it may not work. So that's what I'm telling you, that is the known, damn near chaotic appearance of all forms of this sort of thing, all visible forms. So you have these people that come up with these stories that they in some way got in to the actual inside, not just inside of a school or a monastery or a walled city somewhere. Inside of that, they say, and the stories always get a little more interesting in a sense, that they find out that only once every 93 years or once every 117 years, the kind of secret or the 14 or the 27 actual elders of this operation, and they're normally rung out outside the locale or the local vicinity. That if it was a school in China, it would not just be Chinese now, the stories would be otherwise. That they're actually, even that school that is located in a specific area, a specific culture, a specific religion, the stories get better. This kind of inside story, that the founders, the elders of the operation do not just come from that one locale. That once every 117 years, they will meet, and it turns out that they are from X amount, 42 different locales, people that do not even know each other in a sense, that cannot even speak the same language necessarily. But they come together, and then once every, it's hardly ever less than 100 years, which is not particularly important, but just to show you that the story gets even more intriguing to ordinary mind, that they get together. It's just known beforehand. They meet, whatever, if the last time they met was 1855, then everybody involved, or the few insiders, they know the next one is 1955, and at the last meeting they announce, next one will be in Calcutta, next one will be in Afghanistan. Then the report is, the people come with these reports that they in some way got in and was privy to see what happened. And it turns out that these people do get together, and that once every, let's say, 100 years, they get together, and amongst them all, being of diverse cultures, religions, and in fact, after 100 years, you've got a whole new group of people normally, and so some of them have never even met before. Could it even be possible? None of the 100 or whatever number it was have met, and they're there, and they normally, the story is, they elect a king or a leader. They have all sorts of terms. If they're at all that good, then you would have to assume that to them the names don't mean much. They just have to say, well, he's going to be the elder of the elder, the leader of this particular school. What I want you to, what I'm trying to get at, I'm not trying, I'm getting at it. That was just a way for you to weasel out like, oh, he's just trying to. So that's why I didn't hear it good. Nah. Cheap shot. Wouldn't work. What they're getting at is this. And one more time, there are stories right up to date, whether you know it, it's nothing new, and there'll be some few years from now, another generation, but there's some all the way back to 3,000 years ago, that almost, after they first had the ideas, back then the public ideas of the mystery schools, then somebody else. It was not long after that somebody said, hey, yeah, I know that there's supposed to be a mystery school going on in the back of the temple once a year or every other Thursday, but what you people don't know, besides that, there's something inside of that. Because the part that is always visible to anybody, enough that some known figure can write about, that part always appears to be less than reliable, less than predictable, less than systematic. I mean, it's that simple. Don't get, after all my haranguing and palaver, don't get distracted. Compared to, let us say, the religion, whatever religion. Anybody right now who is dreaming that within, let's say, Catholicism, just for instance, those stories persist, or inside of Christianity in general, but that there are not only monasteries and orders, as you know, St. Christopher and the Order of Malta, the Cross of St. John, the stories hang around that, yeah, it's kind of an order, except you find out that some of these are not monks hidden away. You're not sure what they are. You find out there's a little monastery somewhere up on the side of a hill, and they will admit there's some monks there. But you find there's only 3 or 4, and you say, is this actually the order of so-and-so, or is this the such and such cross, or whatever? And it turns out that the actual, whatever they're calling themselves, I didn't mean to single out any particular one, and it's the order of, St. John on the cross with the rosy cross, or whatever the name, stick one together. Anyway, you find out that these 3 or 4 monks don't really, that's not it. They're there, and it seems like they're making the effort, and they're there, they meditate, but then you find out, or the rumors are that the actual order is like 10 or 20 or 50 guys that never come there. It's bankers, politicians, well-known people all over the world, names that you would know, and they're the ones that support it, and they get together like once a year, and no one knows where, on some island in the Mediterranean, and they dress up in some strange way, and there's some rites that would just make the Pope's toes curl up and down. All right, in every religion, I just picked out that one, in every religion are those stories which, remember, right there on the surface seems unpredictable enough, but what I want you to see, compared to the Catholic Church, compared to any Christian service, but the Catholic Church is a great one because of the ritualistic nature of their public worship, looked at the Catholic Church, at what Mass is, compared to that, then whatever they're doing outside the mainstream of Catholicism, over at some monastery, some group of people, compared to that, you understand, no matter how slight it may be or how unworthy of particular note it may be, you do understand that it is not as regimented, it is not as organized, it is not as systematic as the public practice of Mass. Now, there's no problem with that. Anybody can see that. It's not a secret. It doesn't seem to say anything. So the mind already, even those that are just casually interested in religion, even those that might be just religious historians, they go, yeah, that's true. But then those that have a little deeper interest, and they're the ones who would say, well, now, inside of at least some of these monasteries, there's got to be some validity to these stories that have been around for thousands of years. That, to stick with Catholicism a minute, that Jesus, or after him, St. Peter or somebody, that Jesus gave some secret message, that he passed along something, and that's all they're now crudely doing with all this thing that they do in churches of the Eucharist and with eating of the body and drinking his blood, that's child's play. What he actually did was he passed on some kind of information from somewhere. Now, I know he said it was from God and all that. What he was inferring is it was transcendental. It was mystical in the true sense of the word, a meta-gnostic, and he was passing it along, and that's not what they're doing out there. And this could still be somebody who is not a critic of Catholicism or religion. He's just saying he's interested in what he thinks is something beyond this. And so the person would say, that is very systematized, it is dependable. You go in a Catholic church anywhere on this planet, and you know, even if you do not understand the language, you know what to expect. You can go in and you go through the, making the signs and kneeling and lighting the candles. You feel at home. It is predictable. It is dependable. And so just a little past that, even they, just ordinary people interested in religion or of the religion, they might know enough to say, well, I've heard stories about some of these monasteries and these monks that go off, and I don't know whether they have Mass like we do or whatnot, but I know they go off and they don't raise families. They only eat 2 bowls of rice a week. They only sleep 2 hours a day. And so to an ordinary person interested in Catholicism, whether they be a fanatical follower or not, they would say, all right, compared to this, if that is still part of the church, which they've got to assume it is if the Pope sends them over money and lets them exist and grants them the use of the name, they would still say, well, now that's, boy, that sure is, that's not as predictable. If you say, would you like to go over there and stay with them? Oh, no. Do you think that they're doing something great? And or the person might say, well, I'm not sure. Well, they're over there devoting their life. They read the scriptures 12 hours a day. And they torture the body. They do not eat, and etc. And so they'd probably say, well, I don't understand, but I guess they are up to something a little more important. But they don't know how to describe it. They could say, well, I don't want to go because I got a family, and etc., etc. But one reason they don't want to go is because of the mind. Now, forget all the things about religion. We're getting down to where the runners leave the mudders. Unless it really starts raining, and then we'll all wipe it off our shoes. I guess I'll stop that since there doesn't seem to be that many race fans here that understand. And I call that horse, you dirty mutt. Well, I don't guess I have to say it's an old joke. I can just say it's an obscure piece of humor. Part of, even though an ordinary person could say, if you offered them the opportunity, a good Catholic, and you said, well, would you like to go join that monastery? I can get you in. Even though they would have a story, as I said, well, I can't do it because of my family ties, and etc., etc. One of the reasons that a man could not recognize, a man or a woman, is that they understand that it is too disordered. There is no sense of order to it. They can just hear it. They just know it's not the same as my life is now. It's not the same as even my religious life is now. So, comparably speaking, even from a fairly routine view, that which is outside the mainstream of religious activity, comparably, is less ordered. And when you get into the areas of what is normally called mysticism, then even ordinary minds will say, that's even more disordered. Now don't forget, and even those involved, should they speak publicly? Should you find a school somewhere, Catholic or otherwise, and you said, is this, you describe what you're after, and they went, yeah, us too. And you said, well, is this what you're actually doing? And they go, well, yeah, okay. If you want it that way, yeah, it is. Can I get in? Okay, we got an opening. Well, how long will it take? Hey, can't guarantee anything. You come in, here's what we do. And it seems to be structured, right? That you got to do such and such all day long. It would seem to be very structured. But looked at from the outside, it has less of a sense of order. Because if you're back in mainstream religion and you pursue whatever, Catholicism again, the church as an organized, worldwide, with claims of being transcendental itself, authority says that you do so-and-so. Be a good Catholic and you will reap the reward. Maybe not now, that's not up to us to decide. But at least after you die, then it's the payoff. Once you die, you will be reborn. You will undergo a rebirth and be a new person. You'll be what it is you want to be. So there is that promise. Even though it may not happen now, it is structured in that sense. There is a sense of order. I mean, you're wrong, anyone, to laugh at people pursuing religion and saying they're idiots and they're simple-minded. There are certain views you can say that having to do with your own mind. But they are not. And you can say, well, they're chasing rainbows or they're pursuing activities and contributing money, and they don't even know whether it's going to work or not. All you got's a preacher's word or a priest's word saying, yeah, after you die, boy, you'll get your money's worth. What else is ordinary mind going to do? There is structure to it. I don't mean this just the last port in a desperate storm. It has some sense because there's order to it. It's not just you, if you're an ordinary Catholic, let's say, ordinary Christian of any sort, a religious person. It's not just you and a priest looking you dead in the eye and saying, well, Jesus said, God said, the Old Testament says, the Quran says that if you do so-and-so, the structured, ordered, ritualistic life that we prescribe now, if you do that, you will be reborn after you die. You will reap paradise, you will reap the reward after you die. Now, it's not just a priest and you talking. So don't overlook the obvious and say, well, it's just a priest looking me in the eye or somebody, and it's according to how simple-minded they are. Maybe they're afraid of dying, and they'll take anybody's word for it. No, you missed it. It's not just a priest convince a person of that. It is the net of life. It is you at the ordinary level being a fish in this net, and you cannot live without the net at the ordinary level. You cannot live with that kind of net which is made up of partisan fibers. The priest is not looking at one person saying, yes, you do this, you live this structured life, and you will be rewarded. It is almost the full weight of life. If we had more time, we could build it up real fast. Say, well, it's not just the priest, it's the power of the full church of that religion. But then it's the power of that whole culture / religion, whatever it is. Then it's the whole power of reality, local reality. It's the whole power of civilization. It is not one person being tricked. It is not one poor person being tricked by a priest or a rabbi or a shaman somewhere saying, oh, I'll do so-and-so. It takes two to do that kind of dance toward infinity. Hope for infinity. So, there is an order to that would be lacking, if you remember where we were, that even a Catholic, to use that example again, even if they were confronted with the possibility of getting into a monastery inside a place that the report was that they are involved in something a little more specific, something a little more potentially promising to the individual than the collective ritualistic behavior of Mass. And you go, all right, and you go there, and you talk to them, you hear about it, and it seems to indeed be organized. There seems to be an order to it that you get up at a specific time. In a sense, it is more ordered than going to Mass, because Mass, you know what, they have it 3 or 4 times every morning. If you miss one, you can come to another. You go to the monastery and they say, you'll be here holding out your bowl for the cereal at 2:30 in the morning silently. And they make, when you first join, they say, oh, by the way, if you're late twice. So you could say, well, wait a minute, that's even more ordered than the collective practice of my religion. No. So you're missing it. No. Because the ritualistic practice has order in the sense that there is a specific promise of a payoff. And you get there at the monastery, there's none. The head guy says, hey, you can come here and do all this, you can put up all this just like we do, plus you can't be late more than once, and then you're done for. They'd throw me out if I was late. So you can come do this, but also, by the way, there's no promise whatsoever. Yeah. None, so if you're going to get all in a sweat and your boxers get all wadded up, you might as well leave now and save yourself some time. Inside of that remains the stories that there are secret meetings going on inside of that every 100 years or so, that the ones actually running, the actual power, the understanding is not, to use Christianity again as an example, just one of many I could use, but it is not the public recollection of the so-called teachings of Jesus. It is not the teachings of the church. than ordinary minds that are tended just a bit toward the transcendental. They go, well, you're right, or I can accept that in theory, because if there's something going on, they're obviously not teaching out there in church, or we would all be in some kind of mystical state. So I mean, that's obvious. So if there was some sort of secret teaching that was going through all this, then Jesus that must be what the disciples were about. There was a small group, and he gave them the real secret. And so they kept carrying it on. It passes on, and the succession of popes is kind of a childish, again, literal retelling of the allegorical truth of what originally happened. And so now it's seen as like, well, it's this kind of power passed from pope to pope, and it's almost infallible in the sense they originally meant it. That is, that there is a secret, unseen lineage going on. It's not just electing a guy. It's us, some way we're being led by higher forces to elect the correct guy, which is a nice story. But even those kind of minds with the slightest interest in the transcendental would agree, if not theorize themselves, but as soon as they hear it, they will agree that yes, if there is that kind of secret core to, say, Christianity, it is not out there in the public worship. Whether they took that as being a nefarious conspiracy or not, they would just be aware, well, it's not. I've never gotten it out. If it's there, I'm missing it. And I don't know anybody else that got it or has received it from the public practice of our religion. So if there is something going on, it has got to be in a less public area, such as the monastery, such as the private orders, such as these little splinter groups. So it's got to be there. But you get there, or you look at it, or hear the stories, and they're so chaotic, there's no sense of order, and the mind, the partisan mind, well, it just can't hardly deal with it. Put another way, even if it tried to kind of stick around and deal with it, it can't really work up much interest. It cannot really work up much enthusiasm for it. Not because it's dumb, not because it's simple-minded, it's because of the physical nature of a polarized mind. Because there is no partisanship to the transcendental. And it appears to be, from the outside, chaotic. And so I was trying to get you to see that the partisan mind, this went around a long way, but to show you, if you can follow, that even minds that seem to be a little less rigid, a little less captive of absolute literal partisan thinking, that is, minds that seem to be interested in so-called mystical affairs, they will dream about it, write about it, claim to have visited there or dreamed about it, and they would describe it as being somewhat chaotic. They wouldn't use that word, I know.
No.
Unpredictable, not as structured, not as ordered as you, the reader, who might be interested in religious matters previous to this. It's not quite as ordered and ritualistic and serious and dependable and all that stuff as you might imagine. Then those that carry it a bit further. I just want you to understand how this is going. It seems to be that, all right, here's a mind, or the type of mind, that could possibly get free from the strangulation of captivity and herd thinking, the collective mind of man. So it seems to be beginning to wander off that it can dream of, it can pursue the history of, and speculate the history of mysticism, extraordinary thought. But the further they go, the more they do what? They ride the little Rudy Tooty train. Those of you that didn't enjoy that one about the midway. Because the further out they go, then if they get so far that even their mind begins to kind of lose touch with it, they can't hold on to it, then they suddenly dream or say, now I remember. Or they even say, I was invited there. That's it. There is inside of that is some sort of smoke screen within itself. Inside of that, is the stable core. That every solar system, no matter how shaky it seems, inside of each one is a stable sun. And so it is like a secret within a secret. It is like a mystery within a mystery. That inside is some stable group. And it's always something that is numerically comprehensible. That some group, 35 people, 12 guys, they kind of worn that one out in the Western world, 36 guys, 36 men from all over the planet meet once every 136 years. They elect a leader. They bring the info up to date, even not being able to speak the same language. All they got to do is you get them in a room somewhere. And it's something goes on. What that represents is that there is a stable core even to that which seems to be emblematic, properly so, of the unstructured. The mind will do it. Now, Would you prefer, or would you allow us to leave the world of mysticism and occultism and literary hocus pocus and consider this? What does the ordinary sane mind do with non-standard ideas?
No.
It imposes thereupon a sense of order, and the more non-standard they are, the more it will impose a sense of order, or the more it is inclined, to simply turn away. Because the ordinary mind can hear some of the ideas that are non-partisan, some ideas that, let us say, are based upon, when I say non-traditional views, you understand, I don't mean crazy, because I can talk about crazy and weird if I want to. I'm talking about what this kind of thing is. And the mind can almost hear that kind of faint music, but it can't work up much enthusiasm. It can't really get all worked up for a good reason. Which also, when the more you see the good reason, you realize that this kind of stuff does not have to hide behind strip joints in Beijing or in caves and near inaccessible mountains in Tibet. It can be right here on a street corner, and people they can faintly hear it. They can walk by and hear the music and almost think, that's not bad. And they try to put their ear up close and they go, God almighty, what kind of music is that? I mean, they can't even hear it. It doesn't seem to have a beginning or end. It seems to have no particular stable core. For those of you who like music, it does not seem to be in any particular key. It, in fact, makes Schoenberg sound like a middle-class boob. It makes serial music sound like this actually going somewhere. The ordinary mind cannot hear that which is normally referred to as mystical, transcendental ideas for one reason, one simple reason. Because that which is mystical has no partisanship to it. And the mind hears it, they can hear the words, and it can have a passing interest. It can go, well, that sounds kind of interesting, but it cannot get worked up enough to get much involved, because there doesn't seem to be any kind of, for those of you that wonder why so often you hear criticism brought up around here, the whole idea of criticism, of feeling like there's an enemy, an opposition, the partisan mind explains it. I mean, it's right there physically before you. I know they make nowadays all kinds of weird occult things besides the physiological basis of having two brains. Now, I've been fooling around with information, trying to slip it on you for the last 2 or 3 weeks about why you have two brains. One of them was you only have actually one. The other one's just a mirror. Anybody with a high school education and those little textbooks that have the overlays of the human body go, well, that's not true. It says right here you got two actual brains. They're partisan. Any idea that cannot be seen as partisan, is not felt as partisan, it is almost impossible for people to hear it. They can hear the sentence, but very few people after that find it of any interest. They'll be the same ones that would be those that normally would be attracted to mystical ideas. They go, and they don't know why, but even those people, it becomes more and more refined. Even those people, you carry it much further, and they can say, but boy, that is, I can hear some of that. That is, But they can't really work up much of a sense of urgency or enthusiasm. Look what your own mind does when you hear ideas that do not seem to be of a partisan nature, that does not seem to be something under attack, there does not seem to be, and it doesn't have to be out here, there doesn't seem to be anything in you that's being attacked. Like, well, you dumb people for thinking so and so. How long are you going to wander around believing in God, or how long are you going to think that civilization is going to amount to anything? How long do you believe that there is injustice in the world, we can straighten it out? Now, you got to feel like, well, there's somewhere to stand. There's somewhere you got to push against something. Something is wrong, or why would I try to change? That's where it's got you. That's why the partisan mind is what it is. That's why it's called, those of you that didn't like that item tonight, that's why it's called a partisan mind. For those of you that don't enjoy rooty-tooty, deranged, merry-go-round, redundant, eat-your-own-ass humor. Why do they call the partisan mind the partisan mind? Because it's so goddamn partisan. Yeah. See, I guess an ordinary person, what I was trying to do, might go, does that have some significance? And they might find it of interest for a few seconds. But how can you get enthused? How can you get worked up like, by God, now I get it. That's it. And the person next to him goes, you mean you got it now? He goes, yeah, I do. And they say, well, what is it? And he goes, well, Damn, I can't tell you. I can't explain it.
No.
And the person next to him goes, yeah, right. And then the person that almost had it went, ooh, I guess they're right.
No.
Something's wrong. And then they're back to where they were. Anyone who liked a prediction, I know that the stars are in the proper planets and stuff tonight. In any battle whatsoever, large or small, between you and partisanship, you lose. In case you want to bet your money, if there's not a good mother in the race and you'd like to bet on a horse known as fait accompli,